So we can move on to the next speaker, Bernd Weiss. He's the head of the JASIS panel, a probabilistic mixed mode access panel. He also served as a deputy scientific director of the Department Survey Design and Methodology at JASIS, at Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences in Mannheim. His research interests include survey methodology, methods of survey synthesis, open science to family sociology, and juvenile delinquency. And Bernd is going to talk about investigating self-selection bias of online surveys on coronavirus-related behavioral and attitudinal outcomes, utilizing a German probability-based mixed mode panel. Bernd, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes, you're all set.
Okay, I cannot see the clock. Yeah, oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, thanks for the introduction. This is joint work with Ines Schaurer, and we slightly changed the title. So it's now about coronavirus-related outcomes and characteristics. Our presentation follows the usual structure. First, I will be briefly introducing the problem. Then I will talk about data and methods, introduce or present some results, and then a conclusion and discussion. Let's start with something quite obvious. So for more than a year, we have been hit by a global pandemic. On January 27th last year, the first COVID-19 case was confirmed in Germany. And until recently, as you know, non-pharmaceutical interventions or NPIs were essential in combating the coronavirus, and politics and administration rely on valid compliance estimate with respect to these NPIs, and relying means using some sort of data. Some of these data comes from surveys, in particular from online convenience surveys, and especially in the first half in 2020, more than 100 online surveys have been conducted in Germany. And as you know, these online convenience surveys are strongly affected by self-selection bias. So the idea of our study is to use a probability-based panel, the JASIS panel, which is a mixed mode access panel composed of a CAVI component and a PAPI or offline component, and then use the sample of our online respondents to mimic an online convenience survey. So the research questions that we are targeting in this study are as follows. So the overall research question is, are online-only surveys biased with respect to COVID-19 related outcomes and health characteristics? And more specifically, we are interested in finding differences among pandemic-related attitudinal and behavioral outcomes by survey modes, so by comparing the offline and the online respondents. The second question is about how these differences vary among recruitment cohorts. And the idea here is that we most certainly observe selective attrition, which then might reduce the differences between the survey modes or maybe increase the differences in survey modes. And third, do we find differences among pandemic-related health characteristics per survey mode? And this idea is based on a paper by Schnell and colleagues who investigated a similar question using data from the European Social Survey. Briefly, data and methods. So as I said, the JASIS panel is a probability-based mixed mode panel, CAVI and PAPI, about 5,000 respondents. It targets the general German-speaking adult population. We have about 75% online panelists and about 25% offline panelists. We have 3 recruitment cohorts. The initial one was conducted in 2014, and then we had 2 refreshment rounds in 2016 and 2018. And in March 2020, we conducted the first data collection with respect to the coronavirus outbreak in Germany. And this is important, this was online only. However, we conducted additional waves in April last year, in June last year, August and December. And these were composed of the offline as well as the online component of our panel. And in the following, I will be using the first 3 waves. The December data is not available yet. I will be focusing in my analysis on 4 dimensions in terms of people's responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first one is the perceived risk of infection. This is a scale for instance, asking about the perceived risk. How likely is it that you are getting infected with coronavirus? The second one addresses behavioral changes. So did you start to wash your hands more often, or did you use hand sanitizer? Did you avoid crowded places and so on? The third one is beliefs in the effectiveness of public policy measures. This is about things like closing schools or closing shops, closing restaurants. And finally, we are asking about trust in various relevant policymakers and institutions, such as WHO or the Robert Koch Institute, which is sort of the German CDC or the German Chancellor. And then we have also an item asking respondents if they think that they belong to a risk group in terms of COVID-19. So let me briefly talk about the results. So I think I will skip this slide due to ongoing time. So this graph is related to the first 2 research questions. On the x-axis, you can see the measurement points, the 3 waves, and including the first wave in March, but this was online only, as I mentioned before. And the y-axis, you see the score, either the mean value or the sum score. And the columns represent the 4 outcomes and the rows represent the 4 cohorts. Long story short, there's not much to see. So in terms of the first 2 research questions, there are no differences among the 2 survey modes, and there are no substantial differences among the cohorts. So unfortunately, we did not see large differences between those 2 survey modes. However, things look a bit differently with regard to the risk group. Again, on the x-axis, you have the waves, the 3 waves, April, June, and August. And on the y-axis, you can see the percentage of people that responded or that agreed to belonging to some sort of risk group. And as you can see, the values for online respondents are always lower among the 3 cohorts compared to the offline respondents. This is, of course, the bivariate finding. We also estimated multiple regression models controlling for sex, age, education, and so on. Here, the differences decrease a bit, but the differences are still between 5 and 10 percentage points. Let's come to the conclusion. So, do we find differences with regard to behavioral or attitudinal outcomes? No, unfortunately not. Since we are a mixed mode panel, we would have hoped to find some differences. We also did not find any differences with regard to the cohorts. However, we do find differences in terms of these health characteristics. So respondents who think that they belong to risk group, we do find differences between the 2 survey modes. And obviously and this is an interesting finding, we definitely have to investigate further. There is only a weak association between identifying themselves as being a member of a risk group and the behavioral attitudinal outcomes. So even though you consider yourself as member of a risk group, so either because of some sort of precondition or age, that doesn't affect your behavior. At least it doesn't affect your reported behavior. In terms of discussion, so these are preliminary results. Of course, we have to do more subgroup specific research. We think that our subsample of online respondents is still not biased enough compared to an online convenience survey. And we did find larger differences, for instance, in terms of employment situation or childcare duties. However, these are not part of this presentation. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Bernd. The chat is open for questions. Let's wait a few seconds. In the meanwhile, I can start with, I probably missed this detail, but is the assignment online, offline, random?
No. And
despite that, the characteristics of these two groups are similar.
Yes. So upon recruitment, they first were offered the online mode, and if they refused to participate online, then they were offered the offline mode, so a sequential mixed mode design.
I see.
But
so,
this makes it more similar to an online convenience sample, right? So if it were a purely randomized design, then this obviously would not resemble a convenience sample anymore.
Right. And if you compare like basic demographics between these two groups, and not just these COVID-related outcomes, you also find no difference.
Indeed, we find difference. Due to time constraints, I skipped this part. I wanted to show that indeed our onliners or online participants behave quite as expected. So we have the females are less likely to participate in the online mode. Respondents with a higher education are much more likely, and older respondents are much less likely. So in these instances, everything looks normal as expected. Unfortunately, not in terms of behavior and attitudes.
Can I ask why you say unfortunately? Or why you take that as a bad news?
Yeah, because it's not really a bad news, but of course we would have hoped to find larger differences between the survey modes, which in a way would justify running a mixed mode panel, right? Right now, the only thing I can tell you is that okay, it's kind of fine to run an online sample, because if we compare to the offline respondents, the differences are not that large.
Although these can be outcome specific, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely is. It is outcome specific.
Can never be generalized, and
no.
So you can preserve the two modes. I believe.
But I mean, in terms of policy relevance, and especially in terms of the pandemic, right? So in this special instance, we do not find differences. But as I said, we do find differences in terms of these this risk group. To the respondents were asked if they consider themselves part of a risk group. So these differences are quite considerable. And in terms of childcare duties, employment situation, etc. So we do find differences. It would have been much more interesting to also find these differences with respect to behavior, for instance.
Right. Yeah, but
I know.
I see the point. Yes.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Okay. Yes. Do you have a theory as to why the differences showed up in self-identified risk groups?
Actually, no. As I said, these are preliminary results. We have to dig deeper. No, right now, not. No.
Although from this slide, if you think that offline participants are older, then of course, because of the type of virus we are dealing with, they may feel that they are at higher risk. So this makes sense.
Yeah, of course, but the differences remain, even though, and I did not show the results. Yes, exactly. If we control for age, for education, for sex, then you still have a difference between 5 and 10 percentage points.
I see. Next question, were the online panelists recruited using random probability methods? If so, why would they be expected to resemble opt-in convenience panelists?
Yes, they were recruited using random probability methods, of course, and that's my point in on my discussion slide. Probably our sample is still better than an online convenience sample. So, but as Marco, your first question was about the recruitment design. So they could self-select, some kind of self-select into the panel. First, they were asked to participate online, and then if they refused to participate, they were offered the offline mode. So in a way, this is some sort of it is not self-selection per se, right? But it kind of resembles, it mimics. I think on the first slide, I say mimic. Yeah, but it's a valid point, of course.
Great, we are right on time. So thank you, Bernd, for the presentation, very interesting.